Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of Floss Weekly. This week, Aaron Newcomb joins me. We're going to be talking about ReactPHP, a way to get event loops right in PHP. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Floss Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Floss Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Aaron Newcomb, episode 486 for May 30th, 2018, ReactPHP. This episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV, flexible and entertaining training for your IT career. Visit itpro.tv/floss and use the code FLOSS30 to get a free 7-day trial and 30% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. It's time for Floss Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, little projects, projects you may be using every day and totally unaware of, projects you might want to play with right after the show. I think today it's going to be one of those. Joining me once again is my lovely and talented co-host, Aaron Newcomb. Aaron, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Randall, great. Glad to be here. I'm not outside this time. I'm inside.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You were doing, that was a great show from outside the building. That was pretty funny. I think that's when I was at Red Hat Summit, I think. So it was
I think
3 or 4 weeks ago. So yeah, so it hasn't been that long. I thought somehow I blanked that show completely out of my mind. I think it's because of the production quality and everything like that. So where are you at today?
So today I'm at work. My new employer, AppDynamics, has graciously let me use this tiny, small meeting room. So I've got like a little table. I do have a nice big TV in front of me, but unfortunately I can't really use that for this. But yeah, they have a lot of fun, like a lot of companies in San Francisco, they've got rooms with funky names. So this one is Invaders, and you can see why by looking at the background. And there's walkers, and there's all kinds of cool rooms here.
Yes, and you told me before the show that you would have gotten to use the AV room, but you can't figure out how to get into it.
Exactly, I'm still new. I mean, I've only been here 2 weeks, so I'm still finding where the conference rooms even are in this place. But yeah, for sure, I'm going to try to see if I can get them to add access to that room to my badge. That way, I can get in there. It's a really nice room. It's got sound insulation on all the walls, and it's got a nice Blue Yeti mic right there on the desk. And so if I can get access to that room, I think we'll be in a lot better shape for these things going forward.
Awesome. And I am once again back home in Beaverton, Oregon. Just got here Monday night. Went to bed early last night to make sure I'd be totally rested for this morning. And then I woke up at 3 a.m., couldn't go back to sleep. So that's the annoying thing with going to bed early is sometimes it triggers the wrong cycle when I'm like that. Anyway, enough about you and me. Today's show is actually very interesting. Like all the rest of them, I got to stop qualifying it like that. ReactPHP, which is a low-level library for event-driven programming in PHP. At its core is an event loop on top of which it provides low-level utilities such as streams abstractions, async DNS resolver, network client-server, HTTP client-server, interactions with processes, and so on. And we're going to have a representative from the project, one of the major contributors, see if I can get this right, Cees-Jan Kiewiet, something like that. He'll probably correct me once again if I got it slightly wrong. He's actually one of the core maintainers of ReactPHP, and aside from working on ReactPHP, he's also a herder of PHP packages and is an active participant in the wider PHP community. Now, I'm very familiar with the event loops. Back when threads were sort of a scary thing, people would build these event loops, especially in Perl. We know there's like Poe and libev and a few other things like that. And the whole model of this, as best I understand it, and I think ReactPHP is another example of these, is that you have in a single thread, you have essentially cooperative multitasking. So what happens is that when you want to go out and do some slow I/O, it kind of puts itself into a queue. And then the next thing that needs to be processed will be brought up, whether it's a CPU intensive or whether it's another I/O event that has come in handy. So I am very familiar with the concept. I'm not an expert in PHP. Never bothered learning that since I had all my Perl background. I definitely, what's funny is that Dart and Flutter have a very similar mechanism where everything is done with promises, everything's done with streams, and it looks like ReactPHP is sort of leveraging off all that. Aaron, what's your take on this so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with it. I'm really here to learn today. So it sounds like you know a little bit more about it than I do already. But I know that we certainly have customers that use React, and it's one of the things that people want to use that keeps coming up in conversation time after time again. So I want to learn more about it. I mean, I just looked at the web page a little bit, trying to figure out like how this works. I mean, you can tell even from the example script they have right on the front page. It seems like it's very simple and very powerful to use because the HTTP server that they have there is like 10 lines. Well, not even if you don't include the empty lines, right? It's like 10 lines long, and you're running a simple HTTP server. So I know you can do that with other languages, but I think it's pretty cool that you can do it so easily with this. And so I'm anxious to learn, how this is gonna. I mean, maybe this will get me interested in PHP again. I've been stuck on Python and C++ for a while. So I don't know, maybe this will convince me to come over and give PHP a try.
Sounds good. And also just one more example I want to give is that one of the reasons that Nginx is so amazingly, blindingly fast is that it's essentially, instead of like Apache where you have forked processes, each handling their own independent thread, you've got instead at the core of Nginx, you have a single process queue. And so the I/O all appears to be happening simultaneously. And then you have little bits of CPU time being taken up by the various steps that you have in your Nginx delivery. So that's another example of something that is very highly sped up by having an event loop rather than having like separate processes handling everything, or separate threads. So we'll see. We'll get into all that. I'm sure that our expert is going to be able to help us out real close now. But before we bring him on, I do want to say that this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. Do you know someone who wants to break into IT but doesn't know where to start? Are you looking to advance your IT career? Whether you're just starting out or if you're a seasoned IT professional, IT Pro TV is the only source you'll need. Learn the skills to pass the most in-demand IT certs. From CompTIA and Cisco to EC Council and VMware, IT Pro TV has you covered with over 3,300 hours of binge-worthy on-demand training. New content is added daily, so you'll always be up to date. You can conveniently stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on-demand worldwide via Chromecast, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, PC, or by using their iOS or Android apps. Empower your team with interactive IT training they'll actually enjoy watching. See metrics like logins, viewing time, courses viewed, tracks completed, and more. Accelerate your career with effective and entertaining IT training from IT Pro TV. Join the more than 100,000 IT Pro TV members today. Visit itpro.tv/floss to learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution and to request a free team trial. Or sign up for an individual monthly membership with a free 7-day trial at itpro.tv/floss. Use the code FLOSS30 to receive 30% off your subscription for the lifetime of your active subscription. Premium subscriptions, which include unlimited Kaplan IT training practice exams and virtual labs, are normally $857 a year, but you only pay $600 when you go to itpro.tv/floss and use the code FLOSS30. Flexible training, binge-worthy content, life-changing results. And we thank IT Pro TV for their support of Floss Weekly. And let's go ahead and bring on our guest. Let me try this again. Cees-Jan Kiewiet, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Randall. Great to be here.
And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm from Broek en Lankdijk in the Netherlands, which is about 40 minutes up north from Amsterdam.
Okay. I've been to Amsterdam many times. In fact, I'm going to be there in July for a cruise that goes up to Norway. In fact, I'm going to be north of the Arctic Circle during the summer. So I'll finally get to see a 24-hour day, which would be really cool. So
that's going to be interesting.
Cool. Yes, I know. I'm looking forward to it. In fact, I'm missing OSCON this year. Sorry for all my OSCON fans. I'm actually going to be on this cruise rather than going to OSCON. But we're not here to talk about my travel schedule. We're here to talk about ReactPHP. How well did I do in describing what it's about?
Actually, pretty well. But interestingly, also gave some pointers and examples. I was going to use like Nginx for the event loop, which is, yeah, cool. So, as mentioned, the example we have on the website is really just, it is a complete HTTP server. We take care of everything else under the hood. And if you run that, well, install it using Composer, run that, hit port 8080, you get a hello world back.
Mm-hmm. And so how did this get started? Where did ReactPHP come from?
Well, initially, the original creator, Igor, started playing around with the idea of what Node.js does, what it did for JavaScript. And see if it's possible to do that in PHP as well. And back then, the project was called Node.php.
Okay.
That didn't work out well. It was changed within weeks, days. I have to look it up, but for the wisely. But it grew from there, and it started with a simple socket server and a simple stream, which just reads and writes from streams you get from the operating system. Really, really basic, not what we have today. And we grew from there. We grew from a single repository into a repository with multiple packages in it, and from there on we grew into different repositories for each package, because maintaining one version for everything turned out to be a hassle. You have to keep everything updated and compatible with each other with each release. So what we have done in the last year is, how well do you know PHP at the moment? Are you aware with the standards we have?
I'm really totally naive on PHP. I tried playing with it many years ago. But no, I don't. Nothing of PHP.
So what happened a couple of years ago is that a group of developers from different frameworks started a standardization organization. So we now have, one of them is PSR7, which defines a request and response objects and their signatures and how they should respond. So what we did is we changed our HTTP server so that you get a PSR7 request object. And you can pass that object to another project that supports PSR7. So we don't care what you run on your side. Here's an object you're familiar with. Hook it into your framework or library or project, and it behaves the way you expect it to behave. Which is one of the greater things we did the past year. And to do that, for an HTTP server, we actually had to implement multipart parsing, form URL encode parsing, all that kind of things you normally get for free with Nginx.
Right.
But yeah, that is great. But to do that, we had to think about how servers work, think about what happens when the connection comes in. And for small projects, you have maybe 4 or 5 connections at the same time, and it doesn't matter if you handle them and if there's uploads. But we also have to think about what happens if 100 clients connect and they all have 100 megabytes of data in their request. How are we going to handle that? How are we going to prevent the server from not crashing? Because if PHP hits its memory limit, it dies. It gets killed off by PHP itself. So we have to take care of that. We have to make sure that doesn't happen. So what we did is we created 2 servers. One of them is a streaming server. The other one is a normal server. And what the normal server does, it uses a bit of middleware. And those middleware handle request body buffering, limiting the number of open handlers for requests. So let's say you have a limit of 5. The 6th request comes in. And then we pass that 6th request until one of the other 5 is done. And that way we ensure the server doesn't run out of RAM or not as fast. Yeah, that was
cool.
Yeah, we're really happy with that.
Yeah, let's step back a little bit because I think you
Sure.
said something really important that we might have glossed right over. So would it be fair to say then that React PHP is to PHP what Node.js is to JavaScript?
That's a really dangerous question, but in a way, yes. Well, JavaScript is asynchronous from nature, but Node.js provides really a set of really cool tools to do a lot more with that. And we're trying to, we aim to do the same with PHP. So we give you a bunch of low-level components, like the HTTP server, which then builds on our socket server, and do those things. And you can implement it the way you want it. We're not going to stop you. We're going to advise you what to do and what not to do. But it's all up to you, and it's your responsibility.
One of the things I saw that really surprised me, because I sort of figured that this would have to be something that would be a binary extension that would have to be compiled in, but I think I saw somewhere that this is all pure PHP?
Yes. All of it.
How is that possible?
So we do have some binary components, which are optional. The event loop itself, PHP comes with one. I'll get back to that soon. But you also have event loop like libev, libuv, which is used by Node, and some others, which are can be loaded as extensions to PHP, and the event loop uses those to queue and read and write from streams. But PHP itself comes with the stream select function, and essentially, you can use that to read and write and get notified if a certain stream can be written to or read from. And with that, we built a event loop purely in PHP. The others do mostly the same, but rely on the extensions to do the stream notifications. And one of the key differences with the built-in stream select function in PHP is that the extensions don't have a open file descriptor limit. The stream select function does. You can change it, but you have to recompile PHP. So we support the stream select out of the box, because that means you don't have to install an extension and you can just install it and start writing code. But on production, and we highly recommend using a extension to do any work. Because if you run out of file descriptors, things get ugly. And PHP will stop opening connections, stop handling incoming connections, because each incoming connection is a unique file descriptor that's opened, dealt with, read from, written to, and closed again. So if you run at that limit, things break.
How widespread has the adoption been for React PHP?
Our event loop currently has 5.5 million installs.
Wow. Okay.
That's currently at 8,500 today.
Wow.
So that give or take 7,000 to 8,000 a day on average, including the weekends. And furthermore, we have someone that built an open source social network on PHP and React PHP. And we got a question on one of the repositories. We moved to a Friends of React PHP organization GitHub, because we don't see it anymore as a core component of React PHP. It's more of a second tier. As you have the core functions and you have stuff built on top of that.
Sure.
And the question came in, you have some fixes in the current master branch. Can you tag it? I think, yeah, sure, but we have one pull request to be fixed. And it turned out that project, that open source social network, was using a specific package of us. And they were preparing it to package it into Debian. So,
wow.
yeah, that was my first reaction as well. So that's really cool. And I think that shows how widespread the adoption is. It's nowhere near the way Node.js does it with well, how JavaScript does in Node.js, and that it's everywhere. But it's slowly gathering steam, and people are trying it out, usually in projects, and not just for building HTTP servers. You can do a lot more with that. As you mentioned, the HTTP client.
Now, is this something that I would use in PHP embedded in Apache, or is this mostly just used from the command line stuff?
That depends. Like I mentioned, you can build an HTTP server with it, and then you literally have to keep the process running, and it responds to a request, and you do your thing. But one of the things we do at work, I work at a company that's making that's having an online database with all the buildings in the Netherlands that are searchable. And for a client to make that search easy and fast, we use Elasticsearch. And one of the searches we have requires a couple of tens to 100 calls back and forth to Elasticsearch. And doing those in sequence takes time, and more time than we like. So what we did is, within a normal HTTP request, we're sending out multiple requests to Elasticsearch with ReactPHP and within the event loop, so that we have, let's say, 5 or 10 outstanding requests. We're waiting for a response. And once Elasticsearch is ready with either of them, we get a response, and we start processing that request. And we start doing things with it, with results, and maybe send out the next one. So we can do a full search with tens to hundreds of calls within 5 to 20 seconds, depending on what the user is searching for. So you can do both, but you can't run an HTTP server from an Apache request. We do get questions about that occasionally, but it simply doesn't work.
I'm kind of curious. I want to bring this back up a level just to make sure, because I know that I kind of understand some of this stuff, but I feel like maybe our audience who aren't core programmers may be a little lost in some of this. So I just want to get back to what Randall was mentioning at the beginning, the concept of an event loop and why that's important. I mean, for me, like, I'm a not a PHP programmer. I'm a Python programmer. I've used Perl in the past, of course. I've done C++ programming, and there's, you have your main loop in those environments, which runs. But this is something different. This is an event loop. And I guess I kind of want to bring it up a level and just make sure everyone's aware of why an event loop is important. I'm assuming that it has to do with non-blocking, right? Because I need to respond to these requests and do other things in the meantime as well.
So the way the event loop works is it responds to events coming from the operating system. And what those events are is when you request a website. Let's say we bring up ReactPHP.org through the HTTP client. So what happens first is that we prepare the request, and we then send it out, and we get a response, and we read that, and we're done. But let's say we want to do this podcast website and ReactPHP.org. So we send 2 requests out at the same time. Well, almost. What the event loop does is you tell it, well, I have this file descriptor that I want to write to. And it says, well, okay, cool. So I'll take your file descriptor, and I'll notify you when the operating system tells you can write to it. So we wait for that event. And when the operating system says, well, cool, you can write to it, we write a chunk, which is about 8 kilobytes at the current settings. And then we do the same happens for the other requests. And those things, it depends on who's first. It's basically a race condition where you have to open the connection and wait for the other side to respond. And what the event loop does, it just tells you that either of them is ready, and you can write to it. And you write a chunk to it. And maybe you have a large request. So you write to it, you have to wait a bit. In the meantime, the second request can write to its stream and then wait for it. they write the second bit and come back and wait. So the event loop writes data to the streams when the operating system is ready for it, and when the connection is ready to receive the data. And the same thing happens when response comes in. It comes in chunks. It's not a whole big chunk and complete web page that's ready to be received. So you get chunks to it, and you have to wait for the next chunk. And then when it's ready, you read from it, and you wait for the next chunk until it's all done. So the event loop, in a way, schedules. Well, it lets the operating system schedule which stream can read or write from next. So all you do is really tiny bits of stream reading or stream writing or processing data, and it might look like everything's happening at the same time, but you're doing it tiny bit for tiny bit for tiny bit, and that way you can do a lot of things at the same time. Of course, there's going to be a point when you're doing too many things, but until you reach that point, you can keep the loop busy and do hundreds or thousands of requests or calls or processing at the same time, depending on what you need. Is that clear for you?
Yeah. I think that's a great explanation, actually, because and I'll add one of my own, actually. So I do a lot with microcontrollers, and I set up a web server there, and the web server runs in the main loop in the program, but there's also other things that happen in that program in the main loop. Like I'm switching LED lights. Maybe I'm running through a pattern, a rainbow pattern, where I'm changing my LED lights, all different colors of the rainbow. What ends up happening to me is that if I submit a request to the web server and the program just happens to be in that place where it's running through those rainbow colors, which takes 5 or 10 seconds, I don't get a response back from the web page because it's stuck in that part of the program and it can't respond to me until it goes back and starts the loop again. Yeah. And that's on a microcontroller. With more general purpose computers as well. But how is this different? And maybe it's not. But how is this different than just spawning a child process? Because unlike a microcontroller where everything runs on the processor in one thread, on a computer you can spawn off several threads. Or do you spawn off several threads?
We don't, and we do. We have a child process component which lets you spawn child processes, read to and from them, and communicate with them. But as you mentioned, with the rainbow colors, if you do that and the main loop is blocked, what we do is we have the same loop in Ascension. And what we do within each iteration of the loop is only deal with events that are ready. But if you, for some reason, call a sleep for 10 seconds somewhere in a function that's executed by the loop, things get paused and things wait for that 10-second sleep. So we always tell people not to do that, mainly because you're blocking the loop. Also, people starting out try to use things that block, like database connections. And if you have a big query in there, it might take a while to respond. And those things block the loop and make sure your event loop seems to pause or to wait. But on the child process, what you can do is you literally spawn one and give it a blocking task. Let's say, well, for example, a 10-second sleep. Give it a 10-second sleep task and wait for it to exit and be done, and reap the response. And you can replace the 10-second with the database connection or image generation or, well, basically anything, which is the way how we offload blocking calls.
And is that up to the programmer to know what's blocking? I mean, aren't there non-blocking database ways to access a database that wouldn't stop you from continuing on with the program?
That's up to the programmer to decide what's blocking or not. We generally give the advice to not block, or at least for a maximum of a millisecond. But there are non-blocking database connections. We're seeing more and more packages for MySQL connections, Postgres, Redis. I think there's also MongoDB one, and several others are coming up and showing up on the radar. So it's mainly a thing of knowing your program, knowing how it works, how it ticks, how it's working, and knowing where and what blocks and what you can do to combat that.
At the end of the day, we want these things to run efficiently. Well, thank you for bringing that up to a little bit of a higher level. I just want to make sure we covered those bases for folks that are new to programming, or just to explain why this is important. I'm kind of curious, how difficult is this to implement? If I wanted to get started with React PHP, what do I have to do? Is it just a matter of downloading the library?
Just like JavaScript and several other languages, PHP these days has a package manager named Composer, where you can install or require a specific package, and Composer then downloads all the dependencies needed for that library. So it would be a matter of Composer require React/HTTP, wait for it to install, copy paste the example from the website, include the autoloader, and it's up and running.
Perfect. And since it's written in PHP, I assume that the learning curve is not too steep here. I mentioned that example code you have of the very simple web server, which I think is great. Those examples are, beyond Hello World, it gives people confidence that they can actually tackle something if they're new to it. But if you know PHP, but you haven't used React PHP, what's the learning curve like to get started?
To get started, it's really easy. Just install it, try it out. But along the way, you have to learn a new paradigm of non-blocking programming. And that's the real learning curve. That's taken me a while as well to learn and to get into and understand. That the example is simple, but once you get beyond, as with many programming examples, beyond the example and start to get into deep in how things work, what you want to do, what's compatible with what you want to do. And up until you start to realize that you need to think in a certain way, that's when the learning curve is getting its effect, and you're getting there, because all of PHP is essentially stateless. Where you get a request in, it runs its course, it outputs a result, and it's done. Where with ReactPHP, and essentially when you're building an HTTP server, an application server, you need to think about it's going to be running for a couple of minutes, hours, days, months. And learning that mindset, that you have to take care of memory leaks, make sure you don't leave stuff open and connected that's could be garbage collected ages ago. All those things that come into play when you're building a application server or something that's running longer than maybe 1 or 2 seconds that the normal request is. That's the most important thing to learn. Aside from that, it's mostly libraries and a bit more on the protocol and the DevOps section. Because deploying this does mean you have to understand a bit of how sockets work. The example we have, that it binds to a local host on port 8080, and all those basic things for networking you need to understand, and not deeply, not a lot, but you have to have a basic understanding on how that works and what it does. And I think that's more the learning curve than the programming itself.
So you can be blocking, you could be watching sockets, pipes, return status code from child processes, Is there any other kind of event that you could be watching that's included?
Signals.
Signals. Okay.
Yeah. We actually just added that, I think, a couple of weeks ago. It's been on my list for a while, but we added that, let's see, 2 months ago.
So you can say, for example, watch for a reload signal and then have that reset various states of things internally.
Exactly. And if you use tools like systemd or supervisor that tells you, well, there's a new release, please restart. You can listen on the SIG-term signal that says, well, okay, you're done. Please clean up, do your thing, close your connections, handle off any open HTTP request, and close yourself off.
How about something like iNotify, watching a file hierarchy and then getting notified of that as part of your events?
There are packages for that. I haven't looked into that yet, but that would make a lot of sense for HTTP server to know what's in its webroot directory.
Right, and you could build like a watcher script. Like a lot of people build these things that every time they change a file, it automatically runs a build step so that they can continue processing. Yeah. Cool. So this could all be done for that too. Is there any other event types that I'm leaving out then?
Let's see. Well, we have timers, but
yeah,
we have ticks. Well, what we have is a deferred function execution. So every time the loop does an iteration, we have a queue of lambdas or closures that can be executed. So let's say you have a slightly heavy CPU operation that takes half a millisecond, and you don't want to block the current stream. You just put it in a tick or deferred execution, and the next time the event loop comes around, it runs those functions, and then checks back for any I/O.
Are there methods on the loop object that can let you get some introspection, like how many things are currently waiting in the queue, or forcibly remove things from the queue, that sort of thing?
No, we can't look into the queue. I did create a package that decorates the event loop so that you have an idea of what's going on in there. But we can't look at the operating system level, at least not at the moment. It might be possible on different event loops themselves for the extensions, but I haven't looked into that.
Okay. How many people are working on the core of this?
At the moment, 3 of us.
And how long is your back queue? How many things are in your backlog?
The one on GitHub, or the one we essentially want to do. Some stuff is waiting for months, and we have some stuff that was waiting for years that we hadn't have time to implement. But since a year or so, we're trying to cut back in that queue and have been trying to greatly reduce the number of open tickets, either answer them or open a pull request implementing the feature request if it makes sense.
And do you get a lot of pull requests, or is there a lot of outside contribution happening with this? Yes,
it comes with its phases, but we're getting more and more people doing pull requests. It's not a lot, but everything is welcome. And what we try to do is, prefer to do actually, is to make sure that whenever a pull request is submitted, it makes sense, it's maintainable, and it's usable for the next 2 or 3 years. So that we don't get stuck with features or code in there that we have to maintain and not necessarily happy with it. We want to provide a very stable library for our users that we don't accidentally break stuff somewhere else. Especially since we're on low-level sockets and streams, we have to be really careful we don't overdo things and make decisions too hastily.
Right. What's the largest or coolest thing you've heard implemented in React?
I let's see. I think it's the social media project at the moment.
Right. And do you know how large that is in terms of lines of code?
Not from the top of my mind, but
I know I ask you all the tough questions.
Don't worry. Oh well. According to GitHub, it currently has 6,500 commits and is about 36 megabytes with 32 contributors. So things doing all right.
That sounds pretty big. That's pretty amazing there.
Yeah.
What do you have for testing this? Do you have any test frameworks set up so you can kind of see when you make changes that you haven't broken something?
So we set up testing on Travis. So whenever a pull request comes in or commit's done, it runs on Travis, and we use PHP unit to do all the unit testing.
Okay.
This is fairly standard in PHP. But we really, really like every pull request to have a test or two with it, if it's possible. Which makes sure that whatever is proposed makes sense, is tested.
Right.
And is,
Yeah, so we're almost out of time, but I want to make sure we cover, one or two questions, actually, I want to get in here before we start wrapping up. What kind of people are you missing the skills of the most?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure, actually.
Is this internationalized? Do you have language translations?
We actually don't have any language translations, but it's a low-level library. So the only thing that holds English messages are exceptions and errors, and those are actually just for the developers and programmers using our library. So this isn't something that should bubble up to a end user.
Okay, and is the documentation up to date?
Yes, we actually spent a lot of a lot of time the last year revamping the website, adding a lot of documentation to it, and we even have someone writing a book or writing its second book actually, which is pretty cool.
Yes, I'm familiar with that process very much. So yes, it's good when there's a book out about something, yes, or at least some good online documentation tutorials, things like that. Are people making screencasts with it, talking about what they're doing with it?
Yeah, the same guy that's writing the book is also doing a couple of screencasts at the moment. Basically covering the same items as the book, but differently, and actually showing some live coding and the result of that.
Right. Cool.
People writing blog posts and all that kind of stuff. People doing talks, which are also listed on our website.
Oh, and there's one question that we didn't get to on your list. What are observables?
So, what we do is essentially event-driven programming in a way.
Right.
So when something happens, an event comes in. Observables are actually ReactPHP from Microsoft, but into PHP. So instead of having a stream of data from a connection, you can have a stream of requests coming in from clients. And using Rx, you can do some really cool stuff with that. Say filter out all requests that are invalid or that have a request body that's too large or missing or invalid.
Mm-hmm.
And give different subscribers different kind of requests. So what I've been doing in one of my side projects doing ReactPHP is stream the log from Travis using observables into the console. So you can live watch different builds at the same time. Which are a really, in a way, really neat and maybe even more natural way of dealing with a stream of things. And, yeah?
Yeah, okay. So, and again, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to keep these a little short. But you mentioned RX a moment ago, and I hadn't brought that up all the way through the show. That RX is sort of for people who don't know, it's sort of a standard set of calls so that reactive programming can look the same in all the different languages it's been implemented in. Does ReactPHP comply with that model?
So we don't do that in a project itself. But there is a related project that implements that and uses our event loop to schedule any timeouts or waits in there. So what they even did is make some of our calls, connections, streaming, and data, made a compatible wrapper for that and to expose it as an observable, which is really cool and lets you use those RX IDs and methods within ReactPHP with a tiny wrapper around it.
Oh, okay, so you can put a shim in and it works. Cool.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And is there anything we didn't ask you that you want to make sure that we ask you before we have to let you go?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, yeah, that's always a tough question because you have to take all the things you wanted to talk about and then do a set subtraction of all the things we actually talked about, which is it's hard math at the end of the show. I know. I've been asking you questions for the last hour and everything's just is just mush out there. Well, let's see, get right. Cees-Jan Kiewiet, it's been great having you on the show. Oh wait, I got two more questions. Darn it, two more questions. I think I know the answer to at least one of these. What's your favorite scripting language?
Oh, PHP.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I said. I think I know that one. But what text editor do you use? What text environment do you use?
PHP Storm. It's
okay.
The
from
PHP edition of
people.
IntelliJ.
Yeah, right, cool. That sounds really good. I would highly recommend VS Code, by the way. I think it's a really slick editor too. So,
I should still try that.
It's very free, as in open source and lots of community around it and everything. And I'm really enjoying it for editing my Dart and Flutter code. So that's that. So, well, anyway, Cees-Jan, thank you for coming on the show and talking to us about ReactPHP. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Cool. And that was Cees-Jan Kiewiet talking to us about ReactPHP. What do you think, Darren?
It's really cool. I mean, I definitely want to try this out. I like the fact that it's simple and easy to implement. I think I will confess at first, when you first sent me the notes that we were going to talk about React, I was thinking of React .js for JavaScript. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's great. And then as soon as you sent me the show notes, I took a look and I was like, oh, this isn't that. This is something different, but it's still very cool. And but it does make me wonder whether there's confusion in the space, because React seems to be a very popular terminology lately. We deal with React.js mostly here at work for people using that framework, that library. Right. But there's just a ton of React things out there. And so, in fact, there is a React.js for PHP, which makes it all the more confusing. So I was just looking that up as you were talking. I was like, man, there's just a ton of React stuff. But no, I think this is really cool. I think that especially for people that know PHP or like to work in PHP, this provides a real viable way to do event loops and especially any type of web or socket transactions that you might want to process.
Yeah, it's definitely great for people that are coming over from, say, the Node.js background, where they do understand event loops and how to fully take advantage of them and stuff. So this is great if you don't want to have to work in JS, you want to work in PHP. This is a fully mature solution on how to do that. And I hope they get more resources in so they can take some of those items out of the queue that have been in there for 2 years now. That's always a bit saddening when you've got a thing you want to get to, but nobody else is helping you just yet. So anything more before we do the closing of the show?
No, that's it for me.
Okay, well, then let's look at the upcoming guests. I haven't added any new ones since last week. Got to send out another flurry of email as I normally do, but I've just been really busy this past weekend, so not good. Next week, RB Spy, which lets you profile Ruby processes. I better know what their favorite scripting language is. It's already running. You can give it a PID. It starts profiling. It's a sampling profiler, which means it's low overhead and safe to run in production. Following that is Keycloak, which is going to win it for Buzzword Bingo, I think. Open source identity and access management for modern applications and services. That is going to be winning Buzzword Bingo for sure. I hope we have a technical show on that one. Probably do. Pillar projects after that. We are building the world's best cryptocurrency and token wallet that will become the dashboard for your digital life, or at least they hope so, right? Friendica, decentralized architecture with no central authority or ownership, so relationships can be made across any compatible system, creating a network of internet scale made up of smaller sites. Well, that sounds like it could have all the problems that Facebook's currently having. So hopefully that's not going to head that direction. So that's what we have on the list right now. I do have a lot of people I am talking to, but I need to ping them once again to say, hey, hurry up and get your schedule on the list. Part of it is that I only open up maybe 4 or 5 weeks at a time because I don't want to get the show spread way out in the schedule. I want to try to keep people as close as possible to the current schedule. You can see that spreadsheet at twit.tv/floss. That's the homepage for this show, and linked from there is the big spreadsheet. If there's somebody that is not on that list that you want to make sure we get them on the show, here's how to do it. Email the project leader or community coordinator and have them email me, merlin@stonehenge.com, and I will get them on as quickly as possible, probably even about as quick as I can respond to the email, which I do all day. I spend all day in email all the time. In Emacs. I'm in Emacs reading my email all the time. We have a live stream at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays at live.twit.tv. I don't know if we took anything from the chat room this time. Well, then it's a number of questions where the number is 0. Okay, follow us on Floss Weekly on Google Plus and at Floss Weekly on Twitter. And follow me at Randall L. Schwartz on Google Plus and at Merlin on Twitter. I'm going to be at the Pro Conference in Salt Lake City in June. I'm going to be in Norway on a cruise in July, and then down to San Diego for about 8 or 9 days. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm going to be, in person, right? Otherwise, I'm always on the screen share. It's not a problem at all. Got anything you want to plug there, Aaron?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually coming up the end of June 30th and July 1st, if you happen to be anywhere near the Northern Bay area, we are having our Solano County Mini Maker Fair. It's going to be held in conjunction with the Solano County Fair this year. So we used to have it just on a one-off day on Benicia. This year, it's actually a 2-day event in Vallejo at the Solano County Fairgrounds. We're trying to keep the costs really, really low so everybody can come in and have a lot of fun. You can explore. There's a lot of hands-on learning opportunities. There's fire. There's music. There's all kinds of stuff going on inside. So you come into the fair. Entrance to the fair is free. There's a small parking charge. And then when you get to our event, which is in the main expo hall, it's just $6 a person. And you can find coupons all over the place to even bring that down to $5 a person. So anyway, if you're in the area, anywhere in the Bay Area, really, and you want to come to a smaller maker fair than the big one that just happened in San Mateo, you can come to our event. And again, that's June 30th and July 1st. I hope to see everybody there.
And how's your book doing?
Book's doing great. Actually, I'm just kicking off I think it needs a second edition. There's been some changes, as always, in the Raspberry Pi space. I'm getting feedback from people that have bought the book saying, "Oh, I really wish you would have mentioned how to do this on Linux or how to do this in Linux." So I think I think I'm going to start looking into doing a second edition. If you have any thoughts like that, you can always ping me on Twitter, Facebook, or whatever. I'm glad to take any suggestions, and I'll try to incorporate those in the next version of the book. But that's Linux for Makers. You can find that on Amazon or wherever the best books are sold. Is that the way you said I should say it, Randall?
Yeah, better books, where the better books are sold, yes.
The better books are sold, or the best books.
Right.
Really. I mean, it's one of the best books out there. Come on.
It's
maybe not as good as the Pearl book, but.
Hey, well, yeah, they can't all be the Pearl books. Come on, it's like that's a high standard to compete with, or so I've been told. Yeah. Again, I'm not saying it's about myself. I'm saying it because other people say it to me. All right, there we go. That's good. Well, Aaron, sorry to hear that you've got hammer time going on there in your little room. So we had to cut that out a little bit occasionally, but we got most of the show done without too many hammer noises. So it's upstairs, right? Hearing up there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Someone's trying to get in my room, so I gotta bug out. Unfortunately, I'll try I'll go downstairs next time and tell those guys to quit the hammer drill for an hour or so.
There you go. Well, thanks, Aaron, for being on the show.
I'm sure they'll listen to me, right?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron, for being on the show once again. And to all of you out there, we'll see you all again next week on Floss Weekly.